On October 12, 1972, a small chartered Fairchild FH-227D aircraft operated by the Uruguayan Air Force lifted off from Montevideo's Carrasco International Airport in Uruguay, bound for Santiago, the bustling capital of Chile. Aboard Flight 571 were 40 passengers and 5 crew members, totaling 45 souls, many of them rugged and athletic members of the Old Christians Club rugby team, tall, broad-shouldered young men in their late teens and early 20s, traveling to play an exhibition match against Chile's national squad. Accompanying the players were 9 family members and friends, including mothers, sisters, and girlfriends, turning the trip into a lively group adventure filled with anticipation and camaraderie. The journey was meant to be a quick hop across the continent, typically lasting just 3 hours, but it would slice through the formidable barrier of the Andes Mountains, the longest continental mountain range on Earth, stretching over 4,300 miles and boasting peaks second only to the Himalayas in height, with Aconcagua towering at 22,837 feet. What should have been a scenic passage turned deadly on that fateful day, as a fierce storm battered the region, forcing the pilots, Lieutenant Colonel Julio Cesar Ferradas, an experienced veteran, and co-pilot Lieutenant Ramon Laguerara, to divert. They touched down safely in Mendoza, Argentina, for an overnight layover, where the passengers disembarked briefly, stretching their legs in the crisp mountain air and hoping for clearer skies by morning. The next afternoon, October 13th, at precisely 2:18 p.m., the plane roared back into the sky under mostly sunny conditions, the pilots confident that the worst of the weather had passed. For the first hour, the flight was smooth, the Andes unfolding below like a vast, jagged tapestry of snow-capped ridges and deep valleys. At 3:21 p.m., with Santiago tantalizingly close, estimated at just 50 miles away, the crew initiated descent, navigating the treacherous approach where the city's outskirts hug the eastern slopes of the range. But the high peaks, some exceeding 20,000 feet, left little margin for error, and visibility was crucial. Suddenly, violent turbulence gripped the aircraft, shaking it sideways like a leaf in a gale, while thick clouds enveloped the fuselage, reducing the world outside to an impenetrable white void. Alarms blared shrilly from the cockpit, red warning lights flashing across the instrument panel, signaling an imminent ground proximity alert that no one in the cabin fully comprehended amid the chaos. The rugby players, strapped into their seats, exchanged jokes and nervous laughs, dismissing the jolts as mere rough air. After all, they were tough athletes used to physical trials. But then, through a brief parting in the clouds, one passenger glanced out the window and froze. The plane was hurtling perilously low toward a sheer, rocky mountainside, its snowy flanks rushing up to meet them. Panic erupted in the cockpit as the pilots yanked back on the controls, slamming the throttles to full power in a desperate bid to climb over the obstacle. The ground collision avoidance system wailed relentlessly, but it was too late. The tail section sheared off violently against the granite peak known as Glacier de las Lágrimas, Glacier of Tears, ripping away the last 3 rows of seats and ejecting 3 passengers, Eugenia Parrado, Liliana Navarro, and Daniel Juarez, into the abyss, where they vanished instantly into the void below. The crippled fuselage lurched upward for a few agonizing seconds on momentum alone before gravity reclaimed it, sending it into an uncontrolled dive. Moments later, the left wing clipped another outcrop, buckling and tearing free, flinging more souls, including team manager Daniel Fernandez and others, out into the freezing ether. What remained of the plane, little more than the forward fuselage and cockpit, hurtled downward in an uncontrolled slide, accelerating to speeds of 350 km per hour as it careened 700 meters down the glacier's icy chute, finally grinding to a halt amid a debris field of twisted metal and shattered seats on a remote, unnamed peak at 3,570 meters elevation in Argentina's Malargüe department, some 80 kilometers east of their intended path, a navigational error born of the co-pilots. Misjudgment in assuming they'd cleared the Curacao waypoint. The impact was cataclysmic. The cockpit crumpled like foil, killing both pilots instantly, seats were wrenched from their mounts, scattering survivors across the snow, and the fuselage split open to the elements. Miraculously, out of the 45 aboard, 33 emerged alive, bloodied and broken, their cries echoing in the thin, frigid air. Fractured skulls, compound leg breaks, punctured lungs, and severe lacerations plagued the group, but the true ordeal, a saga of unimaginable endurance known as the Miracle of the Andes, had only just ignited, far from any rescue's reach in this desolate high-altitude wasteland where temperatures plummeted to -30 degrees Celsius and oxygen levels hovered at a suffocating 60% of sea level norms. In the immediate aftermath, 2 young survivors who escaped major injury sprang into action, their medical training proving an early lifeline. Roberto Canessa, a 19-year-old second-year medical student with a calm demeanor and quick mind, and Gustavo Zerbino, 20, another aspiring doctor, methodically triaged the wreckage, bandaging wounds with strips torn from clothing and shirt sleeves, splinting broken limbs using seat frames and ski poles scavenged from luggage. Among the gravely hurt was 23-year-old engineering student Fernando, Parrado, star rugby forward, who lay in a coma for 3 days from a severe skull fracture and brain swelling, his pulse faint as blood trickled from a deep gash above his eye. Canessa and Zerbino worked tirelessly, rationing the few painkillers found in the carry-ons and melting snow for hydration by pressing it against their skin to avoid freezing their insides. Meanwhile, just an hour after the plane vanished from radar, Chile's Air Search and Rescue Service mobilized, scrambling 4 aircraft, including 2 C-47 Dakotas and a pair of helicopters, to scour the rugged border terrain from dusk until nightfall. Radio transcripts suggested a high-speed descent gone wrong, leading rescuers to suspect a crash in an inaccessible glacial valley, but the white-painted Fairchild blended seamlessly into the perpetual snowfields, rendering it nearly invisible from the air even under ideal conditions. That first night, October 13th to 14th, hope flickered among the survivors huddled in the fuselage's skeletal remains, which they insulated with suitcases, cushions, and packed snow to form a makeshift barrier against the howling winds. They shared stories and songs to stave off despair, believing dawn would bring salvation. But the Andean chill claimed 5 more lives, those 2 weakened by injuries to generate body heat, their number dwindling to 28 as frozen corpses were gently laid outside, a grim harbinger of the privations ahead. By October 14th, the search intensified with 11 planes from Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay fanning out over the correct sector, dropping leaflets with messages of encouragement and scanning with binoculars and early infrared tech, yet the glare off the ice and persistent cloud cover thwarted every pass. The survivors, spotting the distant specks of aircraft 3 times that day, poured their energy into signaling, scrawling SOS on the fuselage roof with borrowed lipstick until it ran dry, then laboriously forming a massive red cross by arranging colored suitcases and seat covers in the snow. They screamed until hoarse, waved jackets like flags, and lit small fires from insulation foam, but the planes droned on oblivious, their pilots mistaking the signals for natural rock formations. Exhaustion set in as another fruitless day bled into October 15th, when dehydration loomed as the next killer. Without streams or meltwater sources at that elevation, thirst cracked lips and clouded minds. Resourceful team member Adolfo Fido Strauch, a 21-year-old engineering student, improvised a solar still by polishing a metal sheet from the plane to focus sunlight, channeling melt into empty wine bottles from the galley, yielding precious sips that sustained them. They fashioned snowshoes from seat cushions lashed with wires and insulated against the frost with wool stuffing plucked from upholstery, while rationing the scant provisions, 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, 3 jars of jam, almonds, peanuts, dates, candies, dried plums, and a handful of wine bottles, stretched thinner each meal. On October 16th, 3 days post-crash, Parrado stirred from his coma, his first hazy vision his mother Eugenia's lifeless form beside him and his 19-year-old sister Susanna, pale and moaning from internal injuries and a fractured skull. Devastated but driven, he spoon-fed her melted snow and tiny morsels, whispering encouragements in the dim fuselage light, only to watch her fade over the next week, succumbing on October 21st amid fever and organ failure, a loss that hardened his resolve into steel. Such tragedies underscore life's fragility, how a single storm or miscalculation can shatter worlds, reminding us to cherish every breath. Yet in the grind of daily existence, work deadlines, endless to-dos, how do we seize those moments? That's the essence of my time management course, where I break down proven strategies to not just double your output but amplify your joy, drawing from the very hacks that let me craft videos like this while globetrotting. Participants call it transformative. Check the glowing reviews on screen. For the first 400 using code LOST40, snag 40% off, the links in the description, pinned comment, or QR code below. Note, it's in English. Life's too short not to optimize it. Hailing mostly from Uruguay's temperate coastal plains, the survivors were novices to snow's merciless grip, their lightweight rugby gear no match for the sub-zero gales that whipped through the open wreck. Blinding headaches from altitude sickness compounded the misery, while snow blindness, a painful corneal burn from UV rays bouncing off the ice, afflicted many, with only 3 pairs of sunglasses rationed among the group, forcing others to shield eyes with rags or endure the agony. By October 21, after 8 grueling days, international search teams conceded defeat, citing the improbability of survival in such extremes. After 142 flight hours and exhaustive sweeps, operations halted, a decision announced on radios worldwide that pierced the survivors like a blade when, on October 23, electronic-savvy Roy Harley, 20, jury-rigged their salvaged transistor from a seat pocket with a makeshift antenna of copper wire. Tuning into AM broadcasts, they caught the crushing news in Spanish: the search for the missing Uruguayan plane has been called off, no chance anyone could still be alive. Sobs racked the fuselage, prayers rose in fervent clusters. One survivor later recalled the moment as the day hope died, their isolation now absolute in this frozen tomb. Parrado, however, internalized the blow differently, his engineer's mind already mapping escape routes, sketching crude maps on vomit bags by flashlight. Food scarcity escalated the horror. Initial stocks vanished by day 10, with rations so miserly that Parrado savored a single chocolate-coated peanut over 3 days. Desperation led to experiments, gnawing boot leather, swallowing seat cotton, that only induced vomiting and worsened weakness. At 3,800 meters, no vegetation clung to the barren slopes, no game stirred the silence, starvation's specter loomed. Then, in a ethical maelstrom, Canessa proposed the unthinkable, resorting to the bodies of the deceased, preserved by the cold, as sustenance. "We have to eat," he urged, and the only probable things were the dead bodies of the people that were in this plane. Drawing on his medical ethics, he framed it as a sacred duty, cutting portions with a shard of glass after a group vote sanctified the act. Canessa led by example, tasting first to break the taboo. Others retched at the sight but joined 2 days later, the grim ritual conducted with prayers and averted eyes, fueling their bodies with protein to stave off total collapse. On October 29, 16 days in, catastrophe compounded when an avalanche thundered down the glacier at midnight, a deafening roar of ice and rock that entombed the fuselage under 4 meters of snow, sealing the survivors in a pitch-black void. 8 suffocated in the crush, including team captain Marcelo Perez and young Fido's cousin, their screams muffled to silence. Canessa recalled the terror. "Ted, Roberto, you had it. You're going to die. That's it. A very nice sensation of heat between my legs because I was peeing on myself and saying that's it." The 19 remnants clawed for air, Parrado fashioning a breathing tube from a seat belt to pierce the mass, while they tunneled out over 2 days using a metal pole as a probe, emerging into a blizzard that forced a hasty retreat. Huddled in the air pocket for 3 more days, they subsisted on seats of human tissue and melted snow, morale teetering on mutiny until clear skies beckoned on November 1. Clarity dawned, passive waiting was suicide. The fittest, Parrado, now 24 and fueled by loss, Canessa, 19, with his analytical grit, and wiry Sergio, rugby Vizintin, 21, volunteered for a scouting expedition, outfitted with extra jerky, wool mittens from luggage, and improvised packs. Misled by the co-pilot's final radio call claiming they'd overflown Curacao, they plodded west for Chile's fertile valleys, unaware the crash lay 89 kilometers east, deep in an uncharted glacial basin. After rest and reconnaissance, on November 15, 33 days post-impact, the trio departed, trekking eastward first to probe the terrain, only to stumble upon the severed tail section half a mile away, a treasure trove of suitcases yielding chocolates, meat patties, rum, comics for morale, medicines, and crucially, the plane's two-way VHF radio. Elation surged, but hauling the 24-volt batteries back proved impossible in their emaciated state, so Harley tinkered on site, only to hit a wall. The system demanded 115-volt AC, incompatible without an inverter. Days of futile sparks later, they pivoted west, the radio abandoned as a cruel tease. Winter deepened, avalanches claiming 3 more on December 11, 59 days in, leaving 16 souls, their existence a cycle of melting snow by day and shivering in stitched-together, sleeping bags, by night, courtesy of 18-year-old Carlitos Paz's sewing kit and his mother's quilting lessons, layers of insulation fused into a communal cocoon that preserved scant body heat. On December 12, 2 months since takeoff, the expedition relaunched with Parrado, Canessa, and Vizintin, no ropes or crampons, just sheer audacity against sheer cliffs. The only certain thing was to the west was Chile, Parrado later reflected, packing 3 days' worth of flesh rations. Layered in triple jeans, for socks bagged in plastic, and multiple sweaters, they assaulted the glacier like novices in a nightmare, slipping on 60-degree ice, gasping in oxygen-starved air, blizzards lashing their faces. Nights blurred into a tangle of limbs in the bag, dawn breaking with frostbitten resolve. By day 4, endless peaks mocked their optimism. Vizintin, conserving supplies, sleigh rode back on a seat cushion, arriving in an hour what took days to ascend. Undeterred, Parrado and Canessa crested the summit on December 18, a 4,600-meter vantage revealing not valleys but an infinite sea of white fangs encircling them 360 degrees. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak, I couldn't even think because what we saw was horrible, Canessa gasped. Far west, 2 bare peaks hinted at lower ground. They pressed on, rationing to whispers, hallucinations taunting their steps. 9 days of hellish descent, 61 kilometers total, Canessa shedding to 97 pounds, brought them to a river valley on December 20, cows grazing distant fields a mirage of civilization. Exhausted beyond movement, they spotted Sergio Catalan, a 19-year-old Chilean muleteer herding on horseback across the torrent. Shouts drowned in the roar, but Catalan's keen eye caught the ragged figures. He hurled a stone-tied note the next day, eliciting Parrado's plea, "I come from a Uruguayan plane that fell into the mountains. I'm Uruguayan. We've been walking for 10 days. 14 people with me at the other side of the mountain. In the plane there are still 14 injured people. We don't have food. We are weak. When are you coming to fetch us? Please, we cannot even walk. Where are we?" Catalan, piecing the puzzle with radio memories of the crash, flung bread across and galloped 10 hours to Los Maidens, alerting authorities. Horses ferried the duo to aid, their emaciated forms, sunburned, bearded, clad in rags, stunning onlookers. Word exploded globally, survivors of a 2-month Andean inferno, sustained by unthinkable measures. Chilean helicopters, guided by Parrado's annotated flight charts from the cockpit, pinpointed the site on December 21. On December 22 and 23, 70 and 71 days after impact, the remaining 16 were airlifted out, Marcelo Rollo, Roberto Mangino, and others, gaunt phantoms with frostbite, fractures, and psychic scars, yet unbroken. Hospitals in Santiago marveled at their recovery, altitude edema, gangrene nubs amputated, malnutrition reversed, while the world hailed the miracle of the Andes, a testament to human will. Where there's a will, there's a way, Parrado embodied, his trek a beacon of hope amid horror. This saga endures, much like my other deep dives into aviation tragedies, such as India's deadliest crash. Click through if it grips you. Thank you for joining this journey into resilience.